Hello everyone, welcome to this presentation about Mistika 10. We are really excited to show you this new version because for EGO is a very important moment. This version means a new line of development for Mistika Boutique and Mistika Ultima. This version has been developed in the last 2 years. We started 2 years ago collecting feedback of our users to redesign what we think is the most important area of Mistika Boutique and Mistika Ultima, which is the color grading toolset. And we have used that new redesign to include new features that we think are really important for the color grading workflow. And that's what we are going to see today in this presentation. We're going to focus on color. It's not the only new feature of this new version, but it's the most important one. So we will spend most of the time talking about color in this presentation of Mistika 10. You have here an index with the most important new features of this version. Again, as I said, the complete redesign of the visual editor and the complete redesign of the color toolset are the most important aspects. For traditional users, we have embedded the parameters, the raw parameters and framing parameters on the clips, so you don't need to use a specific effects for that, which makes the time and space a much cleaner environment for work later for color, visual effects, or reviewing, etc. And then we have smaller features that can be really useful in almost every workflow. And of course, another really important new feature of this new version is the integration with the DVO tools from Digital Vision. So here we have our time and space with some clips. I have like two edits. I have this main edit, the one that I'm going to use for most of the time of the presentation, and then a secondary edit with more cuts that I will use for the latest part. For those that are new to Mistika Boutique or Mistika Ultima, Mistika is a very unique technology, and one of the main unique aspects of Mistika is the time and space here. We don't have a timeline, or well, we don't have a timeline in the traditional way of the word. As you can see, we don't have video tracks or audio tracks like traditional solutions. Instead, we have an infinite canvas where you can just move anything anywhere, which allows to have a really flexible and powerful workflows, because you can just organize your timeline and your edits and your color work and your visual work and your visual effects work, in the way that you want. Basically, Mistika is not going to drive your work. It's going to give you the tools to adapt it to your workflow in the way that you want. And we're going to see some of those examples during this presentation. In any case, if you want to have more information about the time and space, we have many tutorials in our channel, so you can check them and understand some of the unique aspects of this approach for the timeline or the time and space in this case. Okay, so I have these shots in here, and I'm going to go inside one of them. Okay, as you can see, we have well, the framing. This is a progress file. We have the framing options here to adapt it to adapt the media to the project. By default, Mistika is always adapting the media to the project. So we have here this setting, and if we move, for example, for this red file, we have the same parameter. Again, Mistika is always adapting the media to the project. If we want to keep it with the input resolution, we can just change it here and say input resolution. And here we have one of the new features of Mistika 10. By default, you will see this image, a cropped version of your image, because of course this is a 4K image and we are working in an HD project. All right. So with this toggle, I can just switch and change the way of visualize my media. So for example, when I enable it, I see my whole image, even if it's bigger than my project, and the overlay of the project. And here we have the information, the source and the project information here. This is really nice to, for example, reframe my image, because I can just move my offset X, offset Y, etc. Control, for example, the scale, and just reframe my shot in the way that I want. Then I can just, again, disable that toggle, and this is again my canvas, my real canvas for the project. So it's really nice to see the whole image for reframe it without without using any effects or anything in the time space. So you can just can keep it clean and just make the changes in here. Okay. For now, for this presentation, I'm not going to reframe anything. This was just a quick example of this new feature, but it is here in the time space in the visual editor, sorry, and it can be enabled or disabled at any time. If we move, if we stay here, sorry, we can see that we have the red params embedded here. This is more for current users. But all the parameters of the camera are here independently if this is red or, for example, sunny, like this is the case. So all the parameters are there to control them in a faster way. All right. For those that, again, are current users of Mistika, but for the new ones as well, as you can see, this is a completely redesigned visual editor. In previous version, we had like all the panels and tabs that can be enabled in this mode were over here. They were a bit of everywhere. And the thing is, most of the time you focus on the work area on your canvas here. In this case, in the visual editor, if we go back to the time space, in the time space. So our idea is to make this area as big as possible. Let me change this second to project. There you go. So this area must be as big as possible because you don't want to be distracted with panels or menus or buttons everywhere. You want just to focus on your main area of work for the creative part of the technical part, but at least this is the important part of the interface. So we have moved all those panels in this vertical toolbar that you can just enable and move and enable of all the functionalities in Mistika 10. All of them are reorganized in a much nicer way in here. Okay. Part of this redesign is, of course, the new color grading toolset, which again is the most important part of Mistika 10. So let's load some color grades over my shots in here. I'm going to leave this one without color grade because it's an EXR multilayer, and we will talk about it later. Okay, so I'm going to use this red file for the presentation, for most of the part of the presentation. So this is the new color grade, as you can see. We have a top toolbar with the basic settings of the color grade, and then we have all the color tool sets. Let's take a look to some of the most interesting tool sets in Mistika 10. Okay, so we are in primary and we have the basic control, lift, gamma gain, and the fourth ball, the soft clip. For current users, this is not a new thing, but for new ones can be interesting because again, we have more trackballs, more controls for the range than other solutions in here, which means that we can control in a much more accurate way the range of my image between these four trackballs. I'm going to enable one of the scopes and put it in overlap so we can see the whole my whole signal. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to do is just to create a basic contrast and saturation. Nothing really fancy, just something basic like change the gain, something like that, etc. Okay, that's fine. Just to explain a little bit how the soft clip works and why it's important. Let's say that your gain is at this point and we are overexposing some of the areas of my image. We can recover this soft clip using the pivot here as well. So this soft clip is connected with this pivot here. This pivot is the soft clip pivot. By default is in at 50, but we can just move up, for example, at 72, to control only that part of the image. See, we are just controlling that part of the highlights without affecting the rest of my signal, which is great to manage in a much more accurate way my image. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is to increase the saturation. There you go. And now, as a colorist, I say, okay, that's fine, but this looks very yellowish. I want to neutralize that kind of yellow feeling and change it. Well, we have different ways. We can just use the traditional trackball and move it and just try to find another look, another color for that yellowish color. So we can just change them with the gain or gamma lift, whatever. Or we can use the new features here, the temperature and tint, which allows me to make this kind of change in a very nice way, in a very intuitive way. Or another way to do it is to use the printer steps. The printer steps is a really cool feature in Mistika. It's connected as well with the temperature and tint, and you have here the step. Basically, it allows to change the amount of red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, or yellow of your image by steps. By default, it's 1 to 1, but you can just decrease it to medium or quarter of steps. And these values affects as well the temperature and tint. So if we put it in 1/4, we can change the temperature of my image in a very accurate way, in a very small steps. And same thing for the printer steps in here. So for example, if I feel that this is very yellowish, I can just decrease a little bit the value of yellow. And now I'm neutralizing that kind of yellow feeling, right? So we have a very accurate control of the image thanks to the pivot here and the printer lights in there. Okay. One of the things that the traditional Mistika users always say about Mistika is they always talk about the superb color toolset in Mistika that is really accurate, that is really soft, and it's because of things like this. The fact that you can control in small steps your image, and you can just put pivots wherever you want and control the signal with the trackball in the way that you want. It gives you a huge flexibility to control your image. So at the end, what you get is a much nicer image than the one that you can get with other solutions. So that's the reason why Mistika is really powerful in this point in the color grading area. Let's explain now more interesting features regarding with color. We're going to stay here in primaries, but let's imagine real situations where our customer comes to the color room and says, okay, I quite like, for example, the sky. The sky is well placed, but I think these shadows here are a bit underexposed, sorry. So we need, I need to recover them back, but without affecting the sky. If I create another layer and change, for example, the lift to move those shadows up, we'll see that we are, well, changing quite a lot of my image. You see, it's changing quite a lot of the signal. It's very radical if you ask me. If we go to the gamma, it's pretty similar. At the end, you're moving quite a lot of range in there. And again, I don't want to affect the sky because my clients like the sky, the look of the sky. Same thing, of course, with the game. That doesn't mean it doesn't make sense to change it because it's what we want to keep intact. So what can we do? For fixing that, we have an option here that is really cool in Mistika 10, which is the Kneesoft, and it can be enabled in a really quick way from here with this toggle over there. And the Kneesoft changes the behavior of the primary. So basically, without the Kneesoft, the primary works with the traditional color science math of primary adjustments. But when we enable the Kneesoft, primary works in a more modern or advanced way. Let me show you. So we have this image and we want to keep intact the sky. So I can just take down the white pivot there. And this means that everything that is beyond this pivot will keep intact. In fact, if I control the gamma, see? If you see the signal here, this part is intact. I'm just modifying the part that are below this pivot. So it's a great way to keep something intact and control other areas. I can just control the gamma or the lift. And as you can see, I'm not affecting the sky in any way. I can just limit the area that I want to work in a very nice way, because at the end I can just control it with those pivots here. So for example, let's say that we can just increase a little bit the gamma and the lift. Just as an example of the accuracy of these pivots, I'm going to leave these shadows beyond the 0 level, because I can use this tool, this new pivot tool, for make some kind of soft clip of the shadow. So I'm going to add another vector, and just to go down with the soft clip, and the white, I'm going to limit the area that I want to manipulate with the lift. So basically, I'm just selecting the area that I want to control with my trackball in there. Okay. So now with the lift, I can just, oops, no, sorry. First, I need to enable the Kneesoft. I can just control in a very smooth and in a very accurate way my shadows in there. Of course, if I force this quite a lot, we see that there is some kind of hard edge in there, hard point. It's a hard pivot. The reason why is because the knees of this is at 0, but I can just put it in 20, for example. And there you go, now it's softer. You can just put the value that you want to make it softer or to make it harder, that's up to you. So with this setting, I can just make a soft clip of the shadows without affecting the rest of my signal, which is pretty great. Now there is another way to do it, and well, traditional users of Mystica normally use this system for these kind of changes, which is using bands. Bands is a really cool tool in Mystica because basically it works in a different way than primary. We see that in primary we have two modes for working, the traditional one and the one with the Kneesoft. But with bands, we work in a completely different way compared with primary. Primary always worked in RGB. So even if you, of course, change the gamma, the gain, or the lift, you will affect the saturation of your image. Now let's say that your client says, I like the saturation of the shadows. I just want to change the luminance of those areas. If we go to primary and enable, for example, the vector scope, we see that we are here affecting, of course, the saturation of my shadows. But if we go to bands, the saturation keeps intact, so I'm just controlling the luminance. That happens because bands works in hue, saturation, and luma instead of working in RGB. So it's a different approach to your image, which gives you at the end more flexibility to select which is the best tool for every moment. Now, for example, here I'm going to come back to the RGB overlap. Let's say that I want to tint a little bit my shadows because they look a bit desaturated. So I can just tint it and just maybe move it to something more magenta or I don't know, orange. That's fine. But now let's say, okay, it's affecting too much of my image. And as we can see in here, is quite affecting most of the part until, well, the highlights mostly. It makes sense because it's the math behind it works in that way. But we can just take the shadows and move the pivot, and as you can see, we can just limit the area where this adjustment is affecting. So again, we can apply this adjustment in a very accurate way in the area that we want to select. Okay. Here as well, we have the trackball. One important thing is following the same philosophy of the primary, the fact that you have 5 trackballs here helps to divide the range in more controls, which at the end is give you much more flexibility and much more accuracy for your final grading. Not only that, we have the same philosophy here. For example, we have the black hue, black sat, and black contrast, mid, white, and all. So even hue, saturation, and contrast is divided in different ranges to better control. So for example, we can come to here, to black hue, and change it. There's a slider there. This is another mode to control those settings, much more visual way. This is again new in this version. So I can just control, for example, the saturation or of the blacks, as you can see, or the contrast or the hue directly from here in a pretty simple way. Okay. Now let's say that the client likes it and said, I would like to give a little bit more life to the sky and increase the saturation of those blues over there. Yeah, you can make a key. That would be the traditional way to do it, or you can go to the fixed vectors, and this is one of the most beloved tools for Mystica users because it allows to make these kind of quick changes. The normal requests for the customer, for the client. You can do them in a really fast way. We have hue, saturation, and luma. So for example, for this sky, I can just going up with my blue slider and the cyan. And there you go. Now we are just increasing the saturation of the sky in a very soft but in a very nice way. We can even change the hue if we want, move it maybe to more green maybe, or more magenta. Just wherever you want, guys. This is a very nice way to control the image when your client is in the color room asking for these kind of quick changes. So instead of making keys, you can just use the fixed vector, and that's it. It's pretty obvious, it's pretty visual, even for your client if he wants to see what is happening and what is going on. It's really easy to understand this interface. We can use the curves for that as well. And this panel has been redesigned hugely in this new version. We have the RGB curves, the saturation against saturation, and luma against saturation, and all the hue curves in the same space. So you can control the three of them at the same time. So for example, you can use this curve to make the traditional S curve to contrast if you want, and look the style that you want for your image. If you disable the solo mode, you have the luma as well, just to change the luma without affecting the chrominance of your image. So again, very flexible, very open, and very powerful to make this kind of making this kind of changes and combine those changes with the rest of the toolset. Now there is a great thing here. For example, these small points in there allows to add like quick points on some parts of your image. So for example, for the sky, as we did with the fixed vector, we can just add a point in the blue, and there you go. The blue point is added, so you can control it and change the hue of that point. Pretty simple, pretty intuitive. Again, one of the main goals of this new redesign was to make the color grading tool easier for new users, and for the current ones to optimize and speed up the workflow, because now we don't have any tools hidden in menus or in different panels. Everything is, as you can see, accessible with just one click. Everything is very visual, very intuitive. It's very simple to control. With a small demo of this, I'm quite sure that you will understand the functionality of the grading, and that's something that is great when you are trying to learn another system. Now for the curves, as another example of the accuracy of Mistika, we have included a really nice tool, which is this button there, that basically opens the curve at any scale. You can just scale it, and Mistika will memorize that scale for future use. And you can just add points at this point at any position. In here, of course, I'm using like a very small range to add a new point, but it's just an example of the accuracy that you can get from the curves panel, the new curve panel in the color grading toolset of Mistika Boutique and Mistika Ultima. Now, this philosophy of the points and this kind of quick access has been as well propagated to the qualifier toolset. It follows the same logic that the overall color grade tool. So we have a top toolbar here with the basic options of the key, and then the filters at the bottom to control your keys. So again, like in the color, like in the curves toolset, we have this quick access to select in a quick way the area that we want to key. So for this this part of the presentation, I'm going to use this shot over here, which has the skin tone of this lady there. So I can just use those keys to select in a very fast way, for example, cyans, or the red ones for the t-shirt, or, and this is probably the most interesting one, the skin tone. So with just one click, I select the skin tone of my shot. It's like a quick access to control these kind of colors, this kind of hues. Now, because well, the t-shirt is pretty similar to the skin tone, is selected as well, so I'm going to create a shape around the face and just track it. So I'm going to first disable my scope, I don't need it open, and I'm going to basically create a quick shape around the face, something like that, something quick. I'm not going to spend quite a lot of time to do this. So rotate it, softness, something basic, something like that, okay? So I go now to the tracker, and here I'm going to click in shape mode and in populate now to create all the tracking points. Now there are some points in here that are on the microphone, and that can make a mistake for Mistika, because I don't want to track the microphone, I want to track the face. So I'm going to remove those tracker points, and because this is a face and it's a round area, make sure that you have selected the round so the track will be better. And I'm just going to click in forward. This will make the tracker. And by the way, well, I'm doing this presentation with my own system. It's not the most powerful system in the world. With a proper post-production system, the tracker is even faster, so don't worry about it. There you go. Now the tracker is done. I'm going to disable the tracker mode just to see the result. See how the track is moving and rotating with the face. Okay, so that's what I need. I'm going now to increase the blur to remove those artifacts there. I can even change a little bit and keep some shadows. If I enable, for example, I change the mode of my key to the display key, I can just enable there. Maybe, yeah, keep the proportional to keep more shadows on my selection. Okay, and with this adjustment done, I'm going to decrease a little bit. I can just disable my highlight mode and go to primary and maybe change a little bit the color, decrease the gamma and the gain, and just change a little bit the color here. So yeah, just to give a little bit more life to that skin. I'm going to create just another layer to see the result. There we go. So we can just see the difference between one of them. Again, very quick to select the skin tone with this quick access. You can then combine with the saturation control, luma control, even with the RGB or the 3D keyer. All of those keys can be combined together, which brings the multi-layer as a final key. The multi-layer is one of the most powerful tools in Mistika in general. In previous version, it was a bit hidden in this tree here, you see, because it is an advanced option of Mistika for those that works with CGI multi-layer or VXR multi-layer that comes from a CGI software or compositing software like Nuke or Fusion, etc. So basically, we can manage those files directly in the color grade for the grading. So for example, I'm going to use this shot over here. As I told you, I was leaving this for the end of the presentation. So I'm going to add a layer root just to load my RGB layer for this shot. This is in ACES linear, so I'm going to use this shot to explain as well the flexibility of our color management and explain an ACES workflow. Our main color management tool is the Unicolor, and as you can see, it's one effect like the color grade in the whole pool of effects of Mistika. This is great because as happened with the color grade, we can combine all these effects together in the way that we want. That's the reason why Mistika is the only system that really combines color grading and visual effects in a native way. There is no bridge between those areas. There is not a color grading mode and a visual effects mode or a compositing mode. You can just combine it in the way that you want. Many compositors use color grade for making, for example, keys or selections. Many colorists use compositing tools to get a better results for their image. It's very flexible, it's very open. It gives you a huge freedom when it comes to control your projects. And this shot is going to be as an example of that flexibility and that freedom. So again, the Unicolor is our main color grading tool. I can apply it in just one shot or in all the shots or in one frame. Full flexibility. The time and space is agnostic from the color space point of view. So you can combine any amount of color spaces if you want, thanks to the Unicolor. So in the Unicolor, I'm going to select linear in here and ACES linear. And I'm going to transform the gamut to AP1 and ACES CCT. This is the color curve that I'm going to use for my grading. So over this Unicolor, I'm going to apply my color grade, and then for my output, I'm going to apply the ACES ODD. And in the ACES ODD, I'm going to select CCT and AP1, which were the output of my Unicolor, and as an output, the Rec 709, because we are doing this presentation online, so I will check Rec 709 to understand better what we are doing. Then I will go to my color grade. And again, as I did with the previous shot in this one, I'm going to basically neutralize that kind of yellowish color of my shot. We saw many ways to do it with the temperature, the tint, the printer steps in here, or using the trackball, but there is another mode that I kept for this moment, which is these two buttons here. I know that when you are working in a project and you are spending quite a lot of time in front of your project, in front of your panels, the last thing you want to do is to try to find that knob of that button on the panels that make a specific action. It's much easier to control the trackball. Most of the time your hands are on the trackball. So if you can control the most important features, the most important controls of your color grade, with the trackball, it could be much easier, especially when you're working so many hours, as I said. So we did that with the precision panels. Mystica Boutique and Mystica Ultima supports two kind of panels, precision panels and the tangent panels. All of them can be remapped by you guys. So all of them are completely open for remapping all those settings, all those features and anything in Mystica really. And one cool feature that the precision panels has is the fact that you can change the behavior of the trackball by enable some modes. And we have translated, we have moved that behavior to the interface. So now we have two more modes here in the primary controls. One is the offset and one is the contrast. If I enable the offset, when I control the lift offset, you see we are making an offset as well in the game. Same thing with the color. So I can just neutralize that yellow using that control. If I enable the contrast, it will work in opposite way. I can just control the gain, and as you can see, the lift is doing the opposite adjustment. And same thing for the color in here. So that gives you quite a lot of flexibility to find the desired look for your shots. And again, it's very simple. You only need to enable or disable one mode, and the trackball will work in that mode. You don't need to try to find that button or that knob for these specific functionalities. So okay, we have this quick adjustment here. I have neutralized most of the yellowish color, but not in the creature. If we just take a look, well, the insect part of the creature here is a bit yellow, and maybe I want to saturate a bit more these red colors over here. So I'm going to use the multi-layer tools to select in a very accurate way my creature here. I'm going to create another vector, go to my qualifier, and go to the multi-layer. And the multi-layer, I'm going to select the pass depth, because now we have include all those settings that in previous version we had in here in the tree, just directly here in the color grade interface. So from the depth, I'm going to select the creature depth, and I'm going to enable my highlight. Now with the depth selected, I can just move, and you can see I can just select by depth my creature. So I'm going to increase the size, the softness, and there we go. Now I have my creature selected. The great thing is that this selection can be combined, for example, with the hue, saturation, and luma. So I can just go to the red, or to the, red, it looks better. To the red selection, open maybe my selection to take my red hue. I'm going to enable the proportion mode to just keep all those details and all the shadows on the skin, and just increase a little bit the blur, just like that. As you can see, a very simple way to select the area that I want to modify. Then I go to come back to, well, no, maybe in bands. And here with this slider, with all hue, I can just change it and change, you see, the color scheme of my creature. So I'm going to change it like that. In Mystic, it's very simple to make version of your same adjustment. So I have this hue selected there. I can just come to here and create history. This will create, as we can see here, number one history. I can just move it maybe more and create another history. And you can create any amount of histories that you want. You can make any changes and save those changes as history, and then you can just navigate between them and compare and select the one that you prefer the most. I'm going to select the first one. Okay. Now, I prefer to, well, first of all, I need to increase a little bit the saturation here. Okay. Now, the interior part of the creature is still looking a very yellowish. So I'm going to change that as well. And for that, I'm going to duplicate this vector. There you go. But instead of using bands, I'm going to reset this. What I'm going to do is to use the same selection. So I kept my selection from vector 2, but instead of selecting the red, what I'm going to do is to select, see, the yellow areas. And with the yellow area selected, I can just come, for example, to primary and change with the gain and just move it to something more magenta. So we are neutralizing that color. That I prefer this kind of look for my creature. Now, I want to make some kind of compositing with flare effects coming from here, from this area over here. So I'm going to relight a little bit my shot by creating another layer. Going to go to qualifier multi-layer, and instead of using the depth pass, what I'm going to use is the directional light pass. I'm going to enable again my highlight. I'm going to select my directional light layer. And as you can see, now we have a layer that this one is really cool because it allows me to rotate the direction of the light and select the part that I want to use for the grading. So for example, if the light is coming from here, I'm going to just select those areas over there. You see? Again, I'm going to blur a little bit my selection. There you go. And then I come back to my primary and just change maybe a little bit the gamma and the gain, just to give some glow, some shine, so highlights in this area here. Okay, so with my grading done, well, in fact, I can add another thing. I can just create another layer, and I'm going to make some kind of glow that coming from here for the flare. So I'm going to create a quick mask. There you go. Soft that mask, quite a lot, in fact. And from here, I'm just going to just change the gain. Oops. Just change the gain. Maybe move it more in there. Yeah, gain, gamma, something like that. You see? So now we are creating some kind of glow that comes from the corner over there. Okay, so with this adjustment done, I can just add flare effects, for example. With my flare effects, I can just put my origin there and my destination in here. What I'm going to do is just to disable the rainbow, and the flares, I'm going to take it and decrease a little bit the intensity. There you go. So now we have added some flares over my image. Just that easy. As you can see, we are combining color grading with color management here and visual effects in the same space in a very easy and native way. But we can even improve this by adding external plugins, and they work like internal effects in Mistika, and that's the great thing, because I can just go to here. As you can see, we have some plugins, the Boris FX Mocha, Sapphire. In this case, we're going to talk about the DVO tools, okay? And I'm going to use one example, the DVO regrain. Let's say that we want to add some grain to my image. Well, my stack is looking a bit high, so I'm going to decrease this level of my zoom to control it better. And I'm going to add my regrain RGB. And this is a plugin, external plugin, but it will work like an internal effect in Mistika. In fact, if I open it, we have the same parameters that the ones, well, the same structure of the parameters that we have, for example, with the flare effects. And as you can see, it's automatically doing the job, is creating some grain. I'm going to increase it just to make it more visual. So there you go, and just to control the overall amount. But you can see you can control many aspects of the grain, the color, the uniformity of the uniform value of the different channels, etc. In this particular case, I don't want to add red color in RGB color. Sorry. So in that case, I'm going just to enable the black and white. There you go. So I add in black and white color, and as you can see, we have combined again not only the color grade with visual effects like the flare effects, but an external plugin in here. And everything in the same space. I don't need to change the mode. Everything's in the same space, so I can manage everything in a really easy way. Now, the great thing of this is, with this time and space, making versions of this project is really, really simple. Let me add, for example, here over this shot, a title. So we can add more different values there. So I'm going to go to my Mistika, open a title, and I'm going to call it Mistika 10 presentation. There you go. Now I can just move this down, for example, there, and change a little bit the size so we can see it better. Let me go to here. Well, in fact, yeah, there we go. I'm going to select maybe this color for the text. Okay. This is just as a quick example. Now, this is like my main edit, and let's say that this is my 60 seconds commercial, or this is my movie and this is my trailer, or I don't know, this is like a smaller version of this one. And how can we adapt the working here to there? We can do it manually, of course, but it's much easier just to take everything, copy, select my target destination, match and paste. And here we have the options for making the paste automatically. We can match by the source path, which I'm going to leave enabled. By the timecode, I'm going to enable it again because if you remember well, one of the shots have a shape tracked, and I want to use the timecode range for that tracker. Replace the effects if those had effects, but it's not the case. And with the animation controls, I can just ignore the keyframes or keep the original keyframes or scale the animations to the new duration. In this case, because again, I have a tracker, I want to keep the original keyframes. So I'm going to click paste, and there you go. everything has been adapted to the new to the new edit. If we go to, for example, this shot, we have the title, and if we go to the color grade, we have the shaping here, and the shape is moving perfectly well with the face because the tracker is kept from the other shot. We can see it in here as well. See, very easy, very simple, and very powerful, and that's an example of the flexibility of Mystica's timelines. We can just make versions as we did with a storyboard, or just duplicate in my whole timeline, move it, put it anywhere, copy from one side to another. The time space is a incredible canvas for designing your own workflow. So this has been a quick overview about the most interesting features in Mystica 10. As you can see, the whole color grading interface has been redesigned in a really nice way. It's very simple to use, it's very powerful. We keep all the original toolset and we have include new features to make it even better. And this is only the first steps. In next versions of Mystica, we will redesign other areas, including other new features to make the workflows easier and much powerful. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation and see you in the next video.